morning. My name is Rick Busby. I'm a licensed Unity teacher. I'm located here in Austin, Texas. My home church is Unity Church of the Hills up in North Austin. I've been there since 2001. In fact, I attended my first service at the new campus there like about a month after the 9/11 crisis and so forth, and have been there ever since. I started pursuing the LUT path in about 2007, taking my first SEE classes, and received my certification last March, about 17 months ago now. So it took me 7 years to complete. And if someone had told me in the beginning that it was going to take 7 years, I probably would have said no. Because one of the things I was saying yes to at the time was the idea that I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough time. That's what I want to talk about today. I've been blessed to be speaking at Unity churches every month this year, and I set myself a goal back in December that I wanted to speak in at least one Unity church every month in 2016, and I was going to talk about the 12 powers over the course of the year, one power a month. I have not spoken less than twice, and for the past several months I've been speaking almost every Sunday, and I'm booked every Sunday but one between now and the end of September. So it's given me an opportunity, like if I was just a minister at this location, we'd come out here and we'd talk about the power of renunciation one week, and then we'd move on. We'd get what we would get, I'd get what I would get as a minister, and we'd move on to some other topic. Getting to dwell in these for a month at a time and talk about, this is the fourth talk I've had on the power of, actually the fifth, because I talked twice last Sunday, the 8 o'clock service at Unity Church of the Hills and the 10:30 at Georgetown. So this is the fifth time I've talked about the power of renunciation this month. I'm on fire with renunciation. As my renunciation goes, my zeal button is really activated. And I believe that the reason why I mentioned that I've written 5 songs, I've taken dictation on 5 songs in the past 7 days. And part of that, and I haven't had that in a while. I haven't had that kind of burst in a while. I've got little fragments here, co-write a song with somebody, and I've been really busy with other things, saying yes to other things, including talking in churches on Sunday and preparing those talks and writing the articles that go along with it and everything. So I've told myself I've had other creative outlets. Yeah, I might be saying no to songwriting at this point in time, but I'm saying yes to all these other things. But I have to say that whenever I'm not songwriting, whenever I'm not expressing myself creatively in the form of a song, my life can get so busy with other activities that I get out of balance. I get out of balance and I start doubting whether I'm ever going to write a song ever again. Have I written the last one? Am I never going to complete another one? And in that moment, what I'm saying yes to is my belief in littleness, my belief in separation, my belief in disconnection from the field of all divine ideas. Anytime I would have doubt that I've written my last song or made my last creative activity. Once again, an observation that whatever I'm saying no to in my head, I'm saying yes to something else. That is the activity of our consciousness. Unity principle number 3 says, we create our lives. I say that we create the quality of our lives at the level of our consciousness by the thoughts and feelings that we allow to dominate in our consciousness. It's not just we create our reality by our thoughts and our feelings, because if that were true, I'd be bouncing all over the walls all day long with all kinds of random thoughts and so forth. We're not necessarily in charge of the thoughts that we think. Stuff happens in the world, we're evaluating, we're using our power of judgment and discernment, power of understanding, we're evaluating all the time. Our left brain is doing yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no all day long. Love, fear, love, fear, love, fear all day long. Littleness, magnificence all day long. Separation, unity all day long. We're making these choices all day long, and we'll be doing so for the rest of our lives. Even in the silence, even when we go to the silence and we're seemingly, stationary and still, there is still activity going on, isn't there? Sometimes our meditations are about swatting away the thoughts. I don't want to think about that right now. I want to think about this other thing. Joel Goldsmith says in his writings that the only purpose of meditation and going into the silence is for us to connect with the awareness of the indwelling Christ presence. There is no other objective to meditation or time in the silence. We don't go there with our petitions. We don't need to ask anything. We don't need to pray for anything in the silence. We just need to know that we have a connection to all power, to all knowledge, that we're actually connected in oneness. I know this church here is working on oneness, aren't we? Like working on developing the consciousness of oneness. We can only develop the consciousness of oneness when we acknowledge that there are no sides in oneness. There are no lines in unity. Once we start putting lines and borders and barriers and everything and segregating things off from, oh, I'm not so keen on this and not so keen on that, and we start trying to separate things out, then we put ourselves in the position of judging what should be outside the context of oneness. How big is space? Do we know? How big is the universe? Do we know? Is there anywhere that we can exile anyone in the universe and them still be outside of the universe? So there's really nowhere to send anybody outside of the oneness. We don't even talk in terms of two-ness, do we? Do we use that? I haven't heard that language yet. Maybe there's a class coming in two-ness. I'm not sure. But oneness. Oneness. In our consciousness, at the level of our thinking, that's what we're doing all day long. We're affirming one or the other. And with so many temptations in the world via our news media and things kind of going off the rails right now, we have opportunities every day, every single moment of every day almost, if we want to plug in that much, to see separation and fear, negative things. It's easy if we dive into that to think the world's going off the rails. It seems like it might be. And I hope we're breaking down so that we can break through. Not just breaking down for breaking down's sake, but breaking down to break through to a new level of consciousness. I know y'all are working on generosity. Do we still have was the thing up there? I dove straight in that. We'll get back to, there it is. This Reverend, this is what y'all have been saying every week is what I'm told here, right? My generosity is legendary. I love to shower my world with love. I like that y'all are working on generosity. Whenever Reverend Anna asked me to speak and she told me that she's kind of working on generosity through the year, and I said, well, I'm working on the 12 powers and I'm talking about the power of renunciation. So let me think about how I might be able to talk about the power of renunciation and tie it into generosity. So, saying no to say yes is the title of my talk, as we've talked about here. So what I did in preparing for this, I actually dove into generosity a little bit. As a songwriter and as a writer and as a speaker, I love words. Anybody else in here love words, like etymology, like looking at where words come from, what the deal is? Generosity, I learned this week, derives from a Latin root that was the equivalent of magnanimous. Magnanimous. And magnanimous broke down into two Latin roots, magna and anime or animus in this regard. And that was spirit. So magnanimous was to be a great soul or a great spirit. And the word generosity is derived down through time out of that root. Up until about the 16th century or so, it was mostly associated with nobility. Generosity was to be born of nobility. Generosity was a virtue, was a trait that the nobility and the wealthy were expected to partake in, to demonstrate, so they could be close to God. Because remember, the old thing was, if you had all this wealth and everything, then you were blessed by God. That was like one of the old paradigms, right? So you had to play that back. So generosity was actually affiliated with the one percenters. Think about it, right? But then as time went on, then it became to be a quality that you could demonstrate. And some of the words that are used that go along with generosity are kindness, benevolence, even unity. That idea of bringing everything together in oneness would almost kind of be that kind of idea. Generosity in the way of great spirit, great souls bringing everything into oneness would be a demonstration of generosity. The other connotation about generosity is that it's big. It's beyond just the little gifts or the little giving that we might give. It's an expansion of our power, and it's an expansion of our power based upon a recognition and an awareness of the power that is available to us. To me, after all the study and everything, the biggest part of spiritual realization, besides getting in touch with, our divinity and so forth, is relanguaging. Relanguaging. Learning to speak about my truth in different ways. Learning to look at the words that we use and have used through the course of our life to describe our experience. For example, if we believe in oneness and connection, that there's no separation, then when we say something like, "Our Father which art in heaven," the typical connotation has been that heaven's some other location that we're going to get to later on, separate from us. But if we really believe unity principle number one, that there's only one power and one presence in the universe and in my life, and that there is no separation, then we have to look at those subtle ways that we might still be affirming separation or duality. Now, I'm not saying to anybody they shouldn't look up to God. I do it all the time. I still have that unconscious instinct that if I'm praying, I look up and outside of me to make that prayer, right? And that's good. As long as I'm doing it reverently, as long as my intention is reverently, there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same token, if we have sort of for lack of a better word, a schizophrenic kind of language to describe our experience, we might not have consistent peace in our life. We're going to have short-term peace or even truce. And by the way, truce is not the same as peace. Truce is just an agreement to cease conflict. It doesn't actually settle the causes of the conflict. We're just going to stop beating each other up. Truce is not peace. Peace is peace. And peace comes from consistency and a belief in a unified system of thought where order is established. In the 12 powers, we have a power of order, the power of spiritual order. And one of the things Charles says about that is that we don't develop our power not because we're lazy, not because we're willful. It's because we misunderstand our true relationship to the divine creator. We misunderstand that. And that if we will work on clarifying our understanding and getting that straightened out, all power is available to us anyway, whether we believe it or not. But until we can begin to wield it responsibly, we have to know that it's within us. We have to make it a priority in our thoughts and our activities and everything to give time to that, to develop the awareness of the presence. Whenever I started this process, man, I was scared. I felt like the whole world was pinching down on me. I had no idea that I had any power. There were days when I literally wanted to sort of slip my skin and just be out of here. And quite frankly, if it hadn't been for the presence of my daughter on the planet, I might have done that. But that wasn't going to be the legacy that I left her. It gave me a reason to connect back to life again, to say, you know what? I might have got thrown off the horse here, but it's time to get back up and figure out what that is. And the very first step in that process was correcting my understanding of my relationship to God. I had never heard of the term co-creator before. And just for the record, it was Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, that connected me with that concept, which I bought at the old Unity Church bookstore on Del Curto in like 1997, somewhere along that part, in that route. And that was a big moment in my process, was buying that book at that bookstore. Up until that point in time, I had been reading all these spiritual books. And then I would get to the lessons, the suggestions about how you can take this deeper. And I would read them and I would go, oh, well, yeah, I could see how if I did that, that would probably deepen my experience and everything. So just the fact that I understood that it might deepen my experience was good enough for then. And I wouldn't actually do the exercise. I'd just go read the next book. Go to the next weekend retreat looking for another teacher, looking for someone else to guide me because I didn't trust my own self. The Artist's Way changed that, because when I got to the Artist's Way, I actually did the exercises. And I understood that I was a co-creator in the universe, that I had creative power within me, and I made an agreement. The first song, I'll play this other song here for you in a minute, which is about letting go. And that was the first song that I wrote that changed my life after the Artist's Way. And whenever I wrote it, it was unlike anything I'd written before. It wasn't me being clever, trying to rhyme and keep things in verse, chorus, bridge, all those kinds of things. It was actually something that came through me, and I was aware in the writing of that song that I was not alone in the process. And when the song was over, when I was finishing it for the first time, like singing it all the way through, getting near the end and realizing, yes, they got to stop. I started crying. I had to, like the last couple of lines in the song that day, I had to like sing through my tears and choking up. And when the song was over, and I was sitting there all by myself in my house, it had such a healing impact on my conscience at that point in time that I literally looked up. This is when I was still looking at God up here. I said, thank you. Thank you for not forgetting about me. You send me the songs, I'll write them. You tell me where to go, and I'll say yes. And that was right after my 40th birthday in 1998 when that happened. And that's pretty much what I've been doing since, is being willing to believe that I was a co-creator in the universe and that all power that was available, all creative power that was available to me. And when I first started believing that, I didn't fully believe it. But all of a sudden these songs started coming and I just kept writing, and all of a sudden these songs started kind of healing me. I began to find my voice. And as I began to find my voice, I began to find my confidence. It took years. It took years to continue to unwind the old belief patterns that would keep me thinking little thoughts about myself. And quite frankly, even after all this time, I could slip back into that consciousness today, this afternoon, after I leave here. I could be driving home and something could tempt me to think about my littleness again. Something could tempt me to shrink. That's in my thoughts, isn't it? That's going on in unity principle number 3. That's the thoughts and the feelings that would be going on in my consciousness. And whether you realize it or not, whether I realize it or not, the power of our will, one of our 12 powers, is what Charles refers to as the executive power. Whatever the will does, whatever the will decides to do, all the other powers have to go along with it. Your power of love has to follow your power of will, even if the power of your will is going in a direction that's fear-based. The power of love might not be able to get you to help, to be willing to bring love into the mix of your decision about your will. Your will is going to do what it wants to do. It's one of the very, very important reasons why the 12 powers are not intended to operate in isolation from one another. They are interdependent. And there's a synergistic energy that happens when you're working in alignment with all of the 12 powers that are available to us. I'm talking about renunciation this month. I talked about order last month, and I'm not talking about understanding next month. And in reality, it's kind of all the same conversation. Because there's no way that I can know what I should say no to unless I apply my spiritual understanding. There's no way to say yes to something unless I'm doing it also in concert with my power of love. The power of love is the harmonizing power. The harmonizing power. So unless I've got love in the mix, what we think is going to be the results? Not harmony, right? Dissonance, maybe? Anybody ever had the cognitive dissonance thing? Chemicalization, as we like to refer to it in unity? That moment when you realize that things that you thought worked just don't work anymore. And you can't carry on with them for another 5 minutes, but you don't know what you can replace them with or what you should replace them with. Learning to sort of, I don't want to say tame or train, those words kind of have negative connotations to me. But learning how to manage, responsibly manage the level of our thoughts and our feelings. Our power of will is going on all day long. You realize that, don't you? Your power of will is not something over in the corner that you only pull out whenever you got some big task to do. It's going on all day. And we are deciding what life is like, whether I'm safe or unsafe in life, whether there's lack or abundance in life. If there's good, is there evil? If there's only one power and one presence, then how can there be an opposing power that would be the equivalent of evil? There's not. So if I say yes to unity principle number 1, there is only one power and one presence in the universe and in my life, God, and it's all good. And if I accept that premise, if I accept that principle as being true, I say no at the same time to the presence of evil. Even if I don't frame up an affirmation that says there is no evil, if I say yes to unity principle number 1, that's effectively what I'm saying. So when we're saying yes, we're saying no at the same time. So how does that relate to generosity? Well, Okay, remember, generosity was a virtue, originally of noble descent. Now it's amongst all of us as a character trait, as a quality, kindness, benevolence, abundance, giving without attachment. That's the big thing. In Malachi, which is the last book in the Hebrew Scriptures, is, to my knowledge, to my awareness, somebody else can point out another one, because I don't think that God runs around saying, hey, test me on that very often. He just says, this is the deal, right? But in Malachi, he says, test me. And he says, test me on the topic of tithing. That's, to my understanding, is the only time in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures, that he actually says, test me on this. Bring your store, bring your gifts, give that, and then watch me multiply that. And he actually challenges us to put that to the test. Now, one power, one presence. We are divine creations. We are created in the image and likeness. We create the quality of our life through the thoughts and feelings we maintain in our consciousness. And we go into the silence, affirmative prayer, and into the silence and meditation to know our connection to the Christ. Those are the first four principles in unity. And that's what they are. They're principles. They're not actions. They're statements of truth. The only one that's an action item is number 5, which basically says this. Hey, these first 4 principles, they're meaningless. They're meaningless unless you're going to put them into action. They're meaningless unless you're going to seize the power implied by these principles and activate them and put them in your life. They're meaningless unless you say yes to these things. And when we do, we become more generous because we know that we're plugged into a source now, a source of abundance. It's actually, once we start walking the path, don't we get plenty of evidence to keep walking the path? I mean, really. Course in Miracles says, hey, you're not expected to believe any of this. We're not asking you to believe any of this. What we are asking is that you put this into practice. And that if you put them into practice, then your own experience will prove their truth. You don't need somebody to persuade you. You don't need somebody to convince you. You just need to be willing. And willingness, by the way, is one of the biggest powers that we can activate. If you want to get yourself stuck out of shame, fear, guilt, grief, any of those things, be willing to be something else. And your energy will go from down here to up here, just based on simple willingness. So we're cleaning up our consciousness. We're saying yes to things. We're saying no to things. Remember that if I'm saying no to forgiveness, for example, this is a good one. This is one we all work with, right? If I say no to forgiveness, if I say, I'm saying yes to holding on to the grievance. I'm saying yes to keeping this person in prison. And if I keep this person in prison to my grievance, guess what? I'm the jailer. Guess what the jailer has to do with the prisoner? Has to stay right there, make sure the prisoner doesn't get outside the cell. Right there, holding them prisoner to my grievance. So I'm saying yes to the grievance. I'm saying no to my peace. I'm saying no to my liberty. Here's another example that we'll close with. Resistance. Resistance is fear. It's one form of fear, one word we use to describe fear. If we have a moment where we're feeling small and we're feeling that we don't have enough gifts, enough time, enough talent, enough treasure to be able to give in a generous spirit, which remember is derived from great soul. Great soul is like the origins of generosity. So if we have an opportunity or an urging or we're tempted to be a great soul, but right at the moment of taking action, we back up and go, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. That's the resistance. And Stephen Pressfield says in his book, The War of Art, that anytime we're moving in the direction of our greatest good, anytime we're moving in the direction of our highest good, anytime, resistance is going to occur. Resistance is going to show up. Always. So if you're feeling resistance to being generous, if you're shrinking in your creative power, pause for a moment. Go into unity principle number 4. Go into the silence. Observe your thoughts. See what you're saying yes to. See what you're saying no to at the level of your activity. You know, a lot of times we talk about going into silence and just kind of getting blank, right? Just get blank and just don't try to think anything. I'm suggesting go there and observe your thinking. Pay attention to what you're saying yes and what you're saying no to. Because my belief is that if you say yes to the Christ presence that's in, if you connect with that and you say yes to that, there's a whole bunch of things that you won't have to actually say no to. You don't have to get a list out and go, well, now I got to get this out of my life, and now I got to get that out of my life, and I got to say no to this and say no to that. No, you don't. You just have to say yes to the Christ presence within. You have to say yes to your power. You have to say yes to be willing. And then let the one teacher that we all have is the same teacher, even the Christ has that one teacher. You don't need me to teach you anything. If I do my job, the best I can do at my job is to make you motivated, make you curious, maybe inspire you to go deeper in your own pursuit and everything. I don't teach you anything. I just maybe inspire you to take action based upon what I'm working on. Your teacher is my teacher, and what you'll find out in the silence and in the truth and the connection with that is the same thing I find out, because the truth is true. It doesn't change. The truth that's true for me is not different than the truth that's true for you at the capital T level. So connect with that, and at that level, it's all about expansion. It's all about gratitude. It's all about large, generous spirit. Thank you all for having me here today. I hope I said something that made sense to you. I've learned a long time ago that I'd rather be right. I'd rather be happy than right. Correct? Right? Rather be happy than right. So I could be wrong about any of this. I could be wrong. I don't need to be right about it. I believe it. I believe it. And I believe that if you check into it with yourself, you'll find it there too. Thank you so much. We're going to come on up.
I pray you'll be our eyes and watch us when we go, and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe. La luce che ti dai nel cuore resterà a ricordarci che la terna stella sei. Nel mia preghiera quanta fede c'è. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, give us faith so we'll be saved. Sogno un mondo senza più violenza, un mondo di giustizia, di speranza. Una mano sua vicino, simbolo di pace, di fraternità. La forza che ti dà, we have said life be kind, il desidero che, and what Sento che